Oftentimes, the legend doesn't live up to reality. But that's not the case of this hard-charging, hard-drinking, and at times, renegade World War II legend. The stories of his service and the unit he led in the South Pacific seem like something out of the imagination of a Hollywood writer. But they are anything but fantasy. In fact, his exploits and those of the unit he led are so legendary, they've been the subject of many books, documentaries, and even a television show. Today we explore the legend that is Gregory Pappy Boyington and his unit of misfits known as the Black Sheep Squadron. Gregory Pappy Boyington was born December 4th, 1912 in Idaho. Academically gifted, he graduated from the University of Washington with a degree in aeronautical engineering and then received a commission in the Army Coast Artillery Reserve. A year later, he enlisted in the Volunteer Marine Corps Reserve with the intent of becoming a pilot. Now, as we will soon learn, Gregory Boyington was a bit of a rebel who believed that sometimes you needed to bend the rules a little to get things done. And it is early in his Marine Corps career that we see the first instance of that happening. To understand what happens next, we have to go back to his early days. His mother and father were divorced when he was very young, and his mother became the common-law wife of another man, a man he thought for his entire childhood was his biological father. His last name was Hallenbeck, and he did raise Gregory as his own. Now, Gregory did not know about any of that until he needed a birth certificate to join the Marines. That's when he found out that his last name was really Boyington. He also found out that if you were married, the Marines would not let you become a pilot.
Doesn't seem fair.
So, because he was married, he had to enlist under the name Gregory Boyington, which was his real name, but it was a name that was not attached to a birth certificate. After completing his training in Pensacola, Florida, Gregory earned his pilot wings on 11 March 1937 and received a commission in the regular Marine Corps in July. It was while being stationed at Pensacola that Boyington developed an affinity for alcohol. As the story goes, while sitting in the officers' club passing time, another officer persuaded him to have a drink. Now, having never consumed alcohol, he reluctantly agreed. And according to Boyington, as told in his autobiography, one drink was all it took to get him hooked. He would battle with alcoholism and the ramifications of it for the rest of his life. In addition to his hard drinking ways, Boyington had a degree of lack of respect for authority. He had a tendency to act first and ask for permission later. One such time occurred when he was stationed at Quantico Marine Corps Base in Virginia. He and another pilot decided to engage in a mock dogfight over the base, without permission, of course. His aircraft experienced engine trouble, which required him to land immediately. Several high-ranking officers were present on the range and looked on in disbelief as Boyington landed his plane. None of the officers watching the spectacle were pleased, to say the least. Gregory Boyington would serve as a United States Marine for 4 years. Finding himself in debt, now divorced, and most likely on the verge of being kicked out of the Corps, he decided to resign his commission and accept a position with the Central Aircraft Manufacturing Company. The company would later become the American Volunteer Group, but they were best known as the Flying Tigers. The Flying Tigers were a group of American aviators that went to China to assist them in their fight against Imperial Japan prior to the United States entering World War II. Boyington and the Flying Tigers in their P-40s were deployed to Burma in the summer of 1941, where he would eventually become squadron commander. Prior to Pearl Harbor and the United States entry into the war, he would be unofficially credited with shooting down 2 Japanese aircraft in the air and destroying 2 more on the ground. Unfortunately, because of a disagreement with the commander of the Flying Tigers, General Claire Chennault, Boyington broke his contract with the group in April of 1942 and returned to the United States, where he would receive a commission back into the United States Marine Reserves. He was successfully able to lobby, or in other words, BS his way into being promoted from lieutenant to the rank of major. And this promotion was in large part due to the fact that Boyington had significant combat experience when most other Marine aviators had none. Because of this experience, Boyington was deployed back to the Pacific Theater, where he became the executive officer of Marine Fighting Squadron 122 in the spring of 1943. It was there that he earned the nickname Pappy because at 30+ years of age, he was almost 10 years older than those he was commanding. It was during the fall of 1943 that Major Boyington took over command of the squadron he would become famous for leading, the 214th, better known as the Black Sheep Squadron. The Marines of the 214th would fly the Voight F-4U Corsair and operated in the Central Solomon Islands. The Black Sheep Squadron got its nickname due to the circumstances under which the squadron was formed and the reputation of its pilots. The squadron, officially known as Marine Fighter Squadron 214 or VMF 214, was formed on July 1st, 1942 at Iwo Naval Air Station on the Hawaiian island of Oahu. And in August 1943, the unit was disbanded and the unit designation assigned to another unit. It was that unit, made up of 27 aviators, some of whom had never seen combat, that would become known as Black Sheep Squadron. The name Black Sheep was chosen because the squadron was initially composed of Marine Corps orphans and misfits who were considered outcasts by other Marine Corps units. The name also reflected the pilot's reputation for being rebellious and not adhering to traditional military protocols. But make no mistake, the men of the 214th were very talented and professional aviators who were committed to the mission. Now, despite this reputation, they would quickly earn the respect of commanders in the Pacific due to their impressive combat record. Now, Black Sheep was not the first name chosen for the new squadron. The men under his command wanted to use the name Boyington's Bastards.
Well, that's a catchy slogan.
But Pappy knew that the name would never fly with the brass. After only 2 weeks of operation, the men of Black Sheep Squadron would claim 23 confirmed victories with another 11 probable. And during the same period of time, they only lost 5 of their own aircraft. From September of 1943 to January of 1944, Major Pappy Boyington would lead his squadron on numerous missions over heavily defended islands. Their accomplishments were numerous, including damaging Japanese shipping capabilities, their onshore installations, and their aerial forces. In fact, the men of Black Sheep Squadron were so good at what they were doing, the Japanese were taking notice. They even knew Major Boyington by name, due in part to the amount of coverage that he was getting by the American press. When he and his men would fly over their bases, the Japanese would get on the radio and dare Pappy to fly down through their anti-aircraft fire. Boyington's response on one of those occasions was to get on the radio himself and tell the Japanese to, quote, "Come on up and fight, you sons of bitches." And on 17 October 1943, they did. During a mission over the island of Bougainville, 24 Corsairs of the 214th, led by Major Boyington, began to circle a Japanese airfield, trying to entice the 60 aircraft that were stationed there to come up and fight. Unfortunately for the Japanese, they accepted the challenge, which ended up costing them 20 airplanes. No Corsairs were lost during the fight. Pappy Boyington was only in charge of the Black Sheep Squadron for 3 months before he was shot down on 3 January 1944. During those 3 months, Major Boyington was credited with shooting down 24 Japanese aircraft, which made him an ace a few times over. His 24 kills were among the most by Marine aviators during World War II, and his leadership as the CO of VMF 214 contributed to the combat readiness of the unit, and their readiness was a significant factor in contributing to the success of the aerial campaign in their AO. After being shot down, he was picked up by a Japanese submarine and taken to a POW camp in Tokyo. It was presumed by all that he had been killed, and it wasn't until he was released on 29 August 1945 that it was learned that he had survived being shot down. Upon his return to the United States, he was treated like a national hero, which he was. The Marine Corps arranged for many of the men of the 214th to greet him as he got off the boat in San Francisco. He was mobbed and carried on their shoulders like a quarterback who had just won the Super Bowl. In March of 1944, Major Gregory Boyington was awarded the Medal of Honor by President Roosevelt. It was awarded to him posthumously because it was thought that he had been killed when he was shot down. On 5 October 1945, he was presented his medal in person by President Truman at a ceremony at the White House. And Major Boyington was not the only accomplished pilot of the Black Sheep Squadron. In fact, among many of their achievements, they shot down 90 Japanese aircraft with another 35 probables. They destroyed 30 ships and would be awarded the Presidential Unit Citation. And the squadron produced a staggering 9 aces. On 1 August 1947, Pappy Boyington retired from the Marine Corps at the rank of colonel. And he would eventually write an autobiography titled Baba Black Sheep, which would become a television series that ran for 2 seasons from September of 1976 to April of 1978, and in which he made a few cameo appearances and was the technical advisor for.
Harry, I want you to meet Greg Boynton. He's going to lead the fighter sweeps against Rabaul. Greg, this is General Harrison Cantley from Washington.
On 11 January 1988, Gregory Pappy Boyington died in Fresno, California, and was interned at Arlington National Cemetery. In 1994, he was enshrined in the Naval Aviation Hall of Fame. And in 2024, a guided missile destroyer will be commissioned, the USS Boyington. Pappy Boyington's accomplishments are numerous, and he possessed exceptional flying and leadership skills that contributed to the success of the United States war effort in the South Pacific. He was a member of the famed Flying Tigers, led one of the most renowned fighting units in all of World War II. He was one of the most successful Marine aviators in terms of enemy kills of the war, and he earned the Medal of Honor. And probably more importantly, he was loved and respected by his men. World War II produced many incredible and legendary stories. One of those is the story of Philip Adair, who flew with the Burma Banshees. In one incident in December of 1943, Adair single-handedly faced 64 Japanese aircraft that were on their way to bomb his base. It made him an instant aviation legend. To hear the story of Philip Adair and the Burma Banshees, click the screen now. And if you like this story, don't forget to smash that like button and leave us a comment. And hey, maybe even share this story with your friends. Until next time, I'm Dennis Gill for Revealing History.